This is Fred Formica. Special times I remember during World War II. Today's date is May 18, 2003. This will start off as memory number 1. While at sea, I remember December 7, 1941. I was in sick bay with a virus. About 8 a.m., general quarters sounded. Over the loudspeaker, a voice announced, "Now hear this. This is no drill. I repeat, this is no drill. Japan has just bombed Pearl Harbor." The ship I was aboard, USS Portland, a heavy cruiser, was part of a task force made up of carriers, cruisers, and destroyers. This force left Pearl Harbor December 5, 1941, and went out to sea. This same task force returned to Pearl Harbor on the 9th of December, 1941. As we entered the harbor, we could hear a pin drop as beach sailors and ship sailors were watching our ship sail into the harbor, not knowing what to expect. But we on the incoming ships never expected to see the harbor in front of us in Pearl. There was plenty of smoke around in the air and the banging on overturned ships' hulls, with sailors still alive in those hulls. The damage to our United States Navy Pacific Fleet is indescribable. Everything seemed under control at the time. Sailors who lost their ships were transferred to seaworthy ships and new quarters, and the USS Portland accommodated a good 100 sailors. At this time, we were well aware that the Jats may come back again at any time. This ends memory number 1. Memory number 2, May 4th to May 6, 1942, the Battle of Coral Sea. Our ship, USS Portland, joined a task force made up of aircraft carriers, cruisers, and destroyers. The carriers were the USS Lexington, the USS Yorktown. Our mission was to sail to the Coral Sea and meet the enemy head-on. The Jap task force was made up with a similar group. Our carrier planes flew off their flight decks to seek out the enemy. The enemy, the Jats, did the same thing. Jap planes, dive bombers, torpedo planes came down on our task force. Our fighters' planes were up in the overhead to shoot down the enemy, but some of the enemy got through, and now our anti-aircraft guns were firing rapidly as the planes came down upon us. After this battle ended, the USS Lexington and the USS Yorktown were bombed and torpedoed. The USS Yorktown managed to get back to Pearl, but the USS Lexington was burning and sinking. They abandoned ship, and we, USS Portland, picked up about 400 of the Lexington crew from life rafts. We also did some damage to the enemy, sinking one of their carriers and damaging another. What we accomplished in this battle was to stop their momentum. At the time, it seemed that everything was going their way. P.S. Also, this battle of Coral Sea starred Lieutenant Butch O'Hare, a Navy fighter pilot, who shot down 5 Japanese planes in one sortie. The same O'Hare that the Chicago airport is named after. This is the end of memory number 2. Memory number 3, the Battle of Midway, June 3rd to June 6th. After the Battle of Coral Sea, we returned to Pearl Harbor with the damaged USS Yorktown and the rest of the task force, minus the USS Lexington. This time was the latter time of May 1942, and I, with other shipmates, went aboard a motor launch to go to the USS Yorktown this Sunday morning, as they had Catholic church services aboard the ship. After services, I surveyed the damage on the Yorktown that they received in the Battle of the Coral Sea. The USS Yorktown was being worked on around the clock in order to be ready in a week's time so as to rejoin the fleet again. June 3rd, 1942, out to sea again with the task force, which included the USS Yorktown, the USS Hornet, and the USS Enterprise. Also, about 8 heavy cruisers and a number of destroyers ready to take on the Japs which had a huge fleet ready to bomb and beach landing of the Midway Island. We went to general quarters on June 3rd, 1942, and all our planes from 3 carriers flew off their flight decks and to surprise the enemy while they bombed Midway Island. And surprise it was. To make a long story short, our plane sunk 4 Jap carriers plus lesser ships. But Jap planes spotted our task force and dropped bombs and torpedoes at our task force as anti-aircraft weapons fired rapidly as the ships were sailing at high speed. We shot down a large number of enemy planes, but the enemy hit the USS Yorktown with bombs and torpedoes. USS Portland was ordered to take the USS Yorktown in tow, and we were one of the largest ships in the area, and to proceed to Pearl Harbor, which was approximately 800 miles east of us. As we had our lines ready to take her in tow, orders were changed, and we were relieved of that assignment. In the meantime, USS Yorktown's crew were ordered to abandon ship. There were approximately 3,000 officers and crew aboard this ship, and there were also hundreds of casualties and many dead. The new orders were for the destroyer USS Hammond to tie herself alongside the Yorktown and wait for a seagoing tug, which in turn would tow the Yorktown back to Pearl Harbor. Meantime, they kept a skeleton crew aboard the Yorktown. Our force returned to Pearl with a great victory. This battle was to become the turning point of the war. A couple of days later, after the Battle of Midway, a Jap sub patrolling Midway area spotted the USS Yorktown and the USS Hammond tied alongside, dead in the water and in broad daylight. The Jap sub captain didn't waste any time and fired a series of torpedoes at his target, every one a bullseye. Both the Yorktown and the Hammond sunk immediately. I doubt I would be telling this history now if the USS Portland proceeded as originally planned to tow the USS Yorktown to Pearl Harbor. End of memory number 3. Memory number 4. On August 7, 1942, with a great number of ships, we bombarded, shelled Guadalcanal. After ceasefiring, the United States Marines made their landing with no enemy fire. Our task force was made up of carriers, cruisers, and destroyers. The landing force was being covered by cruisers and destroyers. That night, on August 8, 1942, a small fleet of Jap cruisers and destroyers slipped by and slipped through the slot, past our picket line of destroyers, and fired away at our cruisers. They damaged the cruiser USS Chicago, sunk His Royal Majesty Australian ship Cambodia, the USS Astoria, the USS Quincy, and the USS Vincennes, all heavy cruisers. I lost buddies of mine who served on these ships. In the morning, our task force with their planes left the area and did not go after the enemy fleet. Admiral Fletcher was in command at the time, and he was relieved by Admiral Halsey at a later date. This was the worst beating by the Japs other than Pearl Harbor that we took in all of World War II. This country, for some reason or another, is not publicized this event like others. It was a disgrace. End of memory number 4. Memory number 5. On October 9, 1942, USS Portland departed from Pearl Harbor on a lone raider mission for Tarawa in the Gilbert Islands, Japanese-held island. This island became famous the following year, 1943, because of the landing of the Marines and their heavy losses. On October 15, 1942, we opened fire on enemy ships docked in this area. We spotted a light destroyer and a couple of cargo ships, hitting all targets. Then we withdrew in a hurry to join the fleet. It's possible the USS Portland was the only ship that acted as a lone raider during World War II in the United States Navy. That was end of memory number 5. In memory number 6, in the Battle of Santa Cruz, October 1942, which became a huge battle with many ships on both sides, aerial torpedo wakes tore through the waters, and the USS Portland had an experience it won't forget. We lost steering control at the time, and torpedo wakes were heading for our ship, and we got hit with 3 severe jolts, and all 3 torpedoes failed to explode. Months later, when we pulled into dry dock, you can see the large dents made by those 3 unexploded torpedoes. In this battle of Santa Cruz, we lost 2 great aircraft carriers, the USS Wasp and the USS Hornet. The USS Hornet was best known as Shangri-La, named by President Roosevelt. It was the Hornet which carried Colonel Doolittle's B-25 bombers that bombed Tokyo in early 1942. We were running out of aircraft carriers and cruisers and destroyers. The only active carrier we had left at this time was USS Enterprise. P.S. The Enterprise, managed to survive through the whole war. End of memory number 6. Memory number 7, November 12, 1942. The Battle of Guadalcanal. While transports were unloading cargo at Guadalcanal, the Portland with cruisers San Francisco and the Helena, plus the light cruisers Atlanta and the Juno, and 11 destroyers, we helped with our anti-aircraft fire to fight off 50 enemy aircraft and drove them away from the transports. At approximately 2 a.m. November 13, 1942, our task force met head-on with the Jap task group, which included 2 Jap battleships, a light cruiser, and 14 Jap destroyers. This area was known as Iron Bottom Bay. In the height of this engagement, a Jap torpedo tore through the water and ripped a huge chunk from the Portland's fantail, killing 1 officer, 17 crew, and wounding 11 others. My watch at this time was known as forward repair, with 2 shipmates, Al Lucas and Frank Hunt. We in the forward repair felt the huge jolt when we were hit. My duties as a shipfitter was to repair damage and put out any fires aboard. With our steering out of control, we were going around at 360 degrees at the mercy of the enemy, but they were sunk or sailed off. November 13th at sunrise, we spotted a burning Jap destroyer. Our ship, still going around in circles, opened fire on the Jap tin can with 6 salvos from our forward 8-inch guns, which scored hits to cause their magazine to explode, erasing the tin can from the surface of the sea. In his endorsement of the USS Portland's action, Admiral Bull Halsey commented, as part of the Portland's performance was most commendable, as especially as regards the ship's damage control, the sinking of an enemy destroyer by the Portland 3 hours and 45 minutes after the night action while steaming in circles was one of the highlights of this action. Our side, besides the Portland's heavy damage, was 5 destroyers sunk. Also sunk was the light cruiser Atlanta and the killing of its Admiral Scott. Also sunk was the USS Juno, which included the 5 Sullivan brothers. Also, may I add, one of our own shipfitters by the name of Sullivan, but no relation to the brothers, was also killed aboard our ship. And back to the sinking of the USS Juno. They were hit late that morning, early that morning, after the battle was over, when a Jap sub boarded the cruiser, when the Jap sub torpedoed the cruiser, hitting the magazine, and she blew up, losing all except maybe 18 survivors. They carried a crew of 800 officers and men. Also severely damaged in this battle was USS San Francisco with heavy losses, which included the loss of Admiral Callahan. With the help of a seagoing tug, USS Navajo, and 10 days of ship's repair under camouflage, we sailed for Sydney, Australia. I have a photo of me taken on Tulagi Island. At the time, I went ashore with an officer who had a camera to take pictures of the ceremony of this burial of our shipmates. My duty was to sign paint their names on the crosses at the burial site. P.S. This battle saw the loss of 2 admirals. This was a first and only time in the history of the United States Navy, the loss of 2 admirals. End of memory number 6. Memory number 7. While still aboard the USS Portland, we, the task group, sailed north through the Aleutian Islands and chased off what Japs were still occupying these islands. What I remember most about the Aleutian Islands is when I went on mid-watch, the sun was still shining. Later we went back to the South Pacific and went through a couple more battles where we sunk more Jap ships and shot down more Jap planes. In the fall of 1943, we bombarded and shelled Tarara in the Gilbert Islands, loaded with Jap soldiers. This is the same island the USS Portland raided just a year ago. After the bombardment and shelling by our ships and planes, the Marines went ashore to take over this island, but they ran into a heavy enemy fire, killing 2,000 to 3,000 of our Marines. It was one of the worst disasters in the Pacific against the Japanese. In December of 1943, I was given new orders to go back to the States for a new construction. I was now a shipbuilder first class with about 4 years in the Navy, United States Navy. This made me what they called an old salt. My orders were 10 days leave and report to Quincy, Mass, Fall River Shipyard. In my 6 years in the Navy, I had many buddies, but there 3 stand out as the closest. First one was Eddie Flanagan. I met him at 90 Church Street, New York, the Navy recruitment station. We were very close buddies through boot camp and the first year aboard the USS Portland. Then I was transferred to the shipbuilder shop and Ed stayed with the deck force as a gunner's mate. We then sort of drifted apart but remained close buddies. The other close shipmate was Al Lucas, who was also a shipfitter, and to this day we still keep in touch by phone or mail. Now the third buddy was Bob Anglin, an electrician's mate first class. I met Bob at the Boston Railroad station. We sat together on the train going to Quincy, Mass, and Fall River Shipyard, where the USS Hancock, a large aircraft carrier, was being built. Our first night in the barracks, someone gives me a shove about 2 a.m. in the morning. It was 2 a.m. It was Bob Anglin. I can still hear him. "Fritz, wake up. It's snowing outside," says. So I say, "What of it?" He replied, "I never saw snow." I, from the Northeast, could not imagine someone not ever seeing snow. It just so happened he was born in Guam Island, grew up in Hawaii, and also Southern California. He was a Navy brat. His father was a retired chief warrant officer. That night, we wound up throwing snowballs at each other. After the commissioning of the USS Hancock, we went on a shakedown cruise, then through the Panama Canal and the South Pacific Ocean to join the Pacific Fleet. This was early 1944, and our fleet at this time was 5 times greater than it was after December 7, 1941. Memory number 8. We started taking island after island on board this ship. I was a shipfitter first class, which made me in charge of the shipfitter shop. I answered only to my chief shipbuilder and my warrant officer. I had about 40 men under my supervision. They made crews of plumbers, sheet metal men, and welders, etc. At this time, I was but 23 years old. During one of these battles, one of our planes, returning from a bomb raid, landed on the flight deck with a loose hanging bomb, which the pilot thought he dropped over enemy area. The flight deck crew gathered around this plane to push it forward to make room for incoming planes. Then, at that moment, the bomb dropped from the plane and landed on the flight deck and exploded, killing about 60 and wounding many others. This explosion took place by the flight deck, on the flight deck next to the ship's island, which held the ship's captain and other high-ranking officers. We, the shipbuilder gang, hurried up to the flight deck, manning fire hoses. After an hour or so, we got the fire under control. Again, it was up to the shipbuilders to repair the damage that was inflicted by this bomb. The explosion left about a 50-foot diameter hole on the flight deck. We went into action and worked around the clock, burning with torches all the ragged edges on the ripped steel and replacing new steel I-beams, plus welding new plates on these steel beams. Within 48 hours, we had planes flying off and landing on the newly patched flight deck. The ship received a well done from Admiral Halsey. End of memory number 8. Memory number 9. Early in 1945, we went through many battles and survived. So far, we can see many ships of ours all over the seascape. But we also saw many kamikaze planes hit their targets, most of the time with severe damage to their targets. Most of these events took place at the time we landed our troops on Okinawa. This particular morning, General Quarters sounded, and there was a report of bogies on the screen, unidentified planes in the area. I ran to my forward repair station, which held a crew of 5 shipbuilders. Just below the hangar deck, this station was just below the hangar deck. As I secured the hatch over my head, there was a tremendous explosion right over my station, above on the flight deck. It was a Jap kamikaze. He crashed his plane with bomb into our ship. Again, my job with my gang of 5 shippers proceeded to the flight deck to man hoses and extinguish the heavy fire that was raging. While we're doing our duty, we ignored the dead and the wounded all around us. We didn't want the fires to reach our magazines and gas storages. We managed to get the fire under control and left the scene of action and proceeded to Pearl Harbor. While at sea, I was given a job order from my shop to manufacture a metal table with a hinged top, which was later used to bury our dead killed in action at sea. Memory number 10. After arriving in Pearl Harbor on the damaged USS Hancock, which docked in the shipyard's dry dock for major repairs, within a few days I was given new orders to return to the States for new construction. This, I believe, was in June of 1945. While at the Navy base in Pearl, I ran into Lieutenant Commander McGilligan, who was once my division officer on the USS Hancock. He always had a liking about me. He even wanted me to go to officers training school with his recommendation. I thanked him, but I told him I was ready to make chief shipbuilder and would be happy at that rate. But he did arrange my orders to be changed from new construction to 30 days leave and shore duty in Florida. My transportation back to the States was USS Indianapolis, sister ship of the USS Portland, so I felt right at home aboard this vessel. Arriving in San Francisco, I immediately made transportation arrangements to go east and then enjoy my 30-day leave and settle in Florida. At my new station in Florida. After 6 months of shore duty, I felt there was no future here with the war over, and only way I can make chief was to go back to sea, which I managed and reported to the carrier USS Midway, a ship named after one of the battles I associate with. As far as making chief, that was out of the question, as there were 3 chiefs aboard, and the only way I could have qualified is if there was only 1 chief aboard. So my time of 6 years experience, my time of 6 years expired in July 29, 1946, and I left the service. P.S. Getting back to the USS Indianapolis. This is the same ship I got off of in San Francisco about 4 weeks, San Francisco, and weeks later, she was sunk by Jack Sub. Prior to her sinking, she delivered the atomic bomb to the Mariana Islands, which this bomb later was dropped on Hiroshima. After the Indy delivered her cargo, she immediately went to sea, rejoined the fleet. She never did rejoin the fleet, as you probably know by now. The Indy was sunk days before the war was ended by a Jap submarine, killed outright with 300 men that left about 800 swimming in the ocean and others only on life rafts. By the time of rescue, 4 days and 4 nights later, there were about 300 survivors left. 500 drowned or the sharks took them down. And it was about only 2 weeks before when I left the Indy. I never forget how fortunate to survive World War II with so many close calls. Amen. My war record was credited with 15 battle stars, a star for each major battle I participated in. Both ships, USS Portland and the USS Hancock, received Navy unit citations. These memories and tapings were made on the request by my dear brother Ed. This tape of World War II experiences I dedicate to my family, relatives, and future descendants. God bless.